Political drama The Apple Cart. George Bernard Shaw was born in Dublin on 26 July 1856. He was an Irishman, son of G. C. Shaw. His father was the youngest son in the family of 13 children. His father was a minor officer in the Dublin Law Court. Mother was an Irish landowner. His father was drunkard and couldn't earn enough money for the family. Mr. Shaw had 3 children, 1 son and 2 daughters. Bernard Shaw learnt music from mother, who had a good singer and musician. He himself became a clerk and cashier in a land agent's office. At the age of 73, B. Shaw wrote The Apple Cart, and its first performance was at the Polish Theatre, Warsaw, in June 1929. Being a bag of stage tricks, Shaw has subtitled it a political extravaganza. There is hardly any plot in it. Shaw has made up the deficiency of the story of introducing 2 interesting and exciting incidents that interlude an interruption of the American ambassador in the scene. Both these incidents are wholly irrelevant in the play. Plot of the drama Shaw's play The Apple Cart not only combines the realm of political satire and futuristic visions, but is still amazingly topical and accurate in its prediction. Shaw has placed the drama in a removed time 40 years in the future. The plot primarily exists as a framework for Shaw's satire. In the first half, he meets 2 of the king's secretaries who introduce the general setup of the play. Then follows a long interview between the King of England, Magnus, and the Labour leader, Mr. Boingers. The first half culminates in a stormy meeting of the King, Prime Minister, and Cabinet, during which the Prime Minister gives the King the ultimatum to remain as asking with no power whatsoever, without even a veto, or else the Cabinet will resign in mass. At the center of the play is an extended interview between the King and his ambitious mistress Orinthia, a model of everything a ruler should not be, no matter how alluring or attracting. After this play, the play parallels the first half with introduction of Jemima, the King's United States wishes to rejoin the Commonwealth. This part is certainly an amazingly imaginary, interesting prediction. The second half culminates in another stormy cabinet meeting during which the king answers the ultimatum with one of his own, declaring his own abdication from kingships and forming a political party and taking participation in the election so that he can win and form a cabinet under his prime ministership. The king's ultimatum is so powerful or forceful in nature that the cabinet, particularly Proteus, the prime minister, withdraws the ultimatum. Thus, the play ends without any particular result except the resolution of the political crisis between the king and the cabinet. Significance of the title The Apple Cart. George Bernard Shaw has taken the title The Apple Cart to signify the condition of the government under a certain leader, or rather a strong man. The apple cart consists of a driver and lots of apples being carried on the cart. The cabinet of ministers function the same role of the apple cart. In the play, there is a tussle between the king and the prime minister Proteus as well as other ministers. It is to decide which will drive the apple cart, King Magnus or the prime minister's Proteus. Both of them are stronger in their position. King Magnus is rather wise and clever than PM Proteus. It is true that if 2 men are on the same horse riding, only one is allowed to sit on the front, but the question arises who will sit on the front. In case of resignation from any one of them, it may upset the cart. The title itself remarkable for political significance. Porteous plans the ace of trumps, the threat of abdication. In fact, both of them know that they have to keep on driving the cart anyway. Shaw, in his preface, has said for the background of play, one of his friends who has engineer proposed to transport all the packages in cheap price if the government assented. The government, instead of giving the tender of the person at expensive price. This company was the Brickages Limited. Therefore, Shaw suggests here by the apple cart that in a democratic system, the government is simply a cart which is used by the Prime Minister in benefits of own interest. There is no interest of running the cart wisely and with honor of the nation. The cart is full of politicians who humbug the public and all the time they try to upset the cart. Characterization. First, King Magnus. The King Magnus is a wise man. His wisdom is perceived throughout the play. There has been crisis after crisis and he has been able to tackle all them actually. The king is well known for his tactics. The new minister, Mr. Proteus, has heard about him, but yet he is highly persuaded by the cordial approach. The king is the most prominent character in the play. He is most dominant and magnificent character. He has been described to be the tallest, tedious-looking gentleman of 45 or thereabouts. His etiquette manners is very skeptical. Mr. Proteus says that the ceremony cuts no ice with him, yet he deceived. The king has the upper hand. The king has good experience of politics. He has strong insight and better foresight. For him, a king or any official is only an Indian rubber stamp, but not wholly, because of she is a living soul. So his theory breaks down in every real emergency. He knows that everybody flatters the king and often he is made a puppet. Though a king had less power than a republican, his position is secure. He is quite clever to impress the new minister by introducing him with the princes. That's the popular tactics known to the ministers too. They laugh when they hear about the introduction. Proteus says that the king is as artful as the very devil. He is a superior player in the cards game, politics. Magnus has been exercising the constitutional right of the royal veto too, but it becomes a crisis from the cabinet's side. He believes that the royal veto is essential for check of any danger, but that is opposed by the ministers. Magnus shows the corruption that often happens in offices, but other ignores. They wish to make the king totally dumb and disabled by the means of ultimatum. The king very skillfully and diplomatically diverts the case to the parliamentary decision whether they will approve of cabinet government or monarchical government. He pursues the minister that certainly he will lose the favor. He speaks splendidly and convinces the advantages and disadvantages of different political systems as well as human attitudes. He plays with the affairs of Oronthia just like a young lover, but never lets have upper hand. He proves his strong devotion to his married queen, though she may be a cabbage, not rose, in opinion of Oronthia. He loves his nation with true soul that we can see when he refuses to shift the throne to Dublin. He has victory over the crisis not by greater but because he has the ace of trumps in his hand and knows when to play. The king stands for royal dignity, respectability and tactics. The second character, the Prime Minister Proteus. Proteus is a fool and very aggressive personality in the play. he has been substituted by the corrective attitudes of the ministers. As all the ministers are indulged in unacceptable and disgusting manners of temper, bullyings, sneering, swearing, kickings, and vulgar other activities, the Prime Minister is seen as useless horse tamer. No any horses are in his command. He is over ambitious for power. That's why Proteus and Brongus argue sometimes for power. He is conscious of the king's tactics and tries to overcome him. He often threatens for resignation and tries to hold the situation in his favor. Crisis, ultimatum, and bitter and sometimes unreasonable arguments are brought ahead to reduce the king's power to the Indian rubber stamp. Magnus flatters him and makes him believe that he is really superior. Proteus often becomes the subject of his tricks. He holds his claim that there must be restriction in the king's sides. He loses no opportunity of displaying the throne once for all. His counter article in newspaper usually brings a crisis against the king. Proteus has overconfidence, and as he has defeated all other parties and while the country was run by the king, he wants to bring the king into his confidence, but he has no right sense of right decision in right time. He is proved as democratic humbug, not responsible to the king, the public, or the kingdom. Solution of the crisis is not brought out in the hall, but walking in the temples and having private discussion. Private meeting and talk with King Magnus in the second act of the play brings up the resolution. The king and the prime minister's privacy is scandalous. Magnus believes that Proteus is clever fellow and he is beat him, but it would give him no satisfaction to beat him. This statement reveals Proteus' true nature. There is a cynical tone that he is really very foolish. He is responsible for going to upset the apple cart. Finally, he is easily defeated. The game turns in favor of the tactful king. The same threat of resignation, arc of trumps applied by Proteus is used by king in turn. Proteus realizes that the king is able to make a territory in the scene and therefore he surrenders himself. He tears off the ultimatum and quits the meeting. Also face the election rather than staying as weak and dumb king. He also surrenders himself helplessly. The king's response to the cabinet ultimatum as revealed in the apple cart. The ultimatum contains three conditions. First, the king should not make any speeches. Second, the king should not talk about the veto power anymore. Third, the king should not give any articles to the newspaper or he should not run the paper from behind the places. This ultimatum is given by the cabinet to make the king merely a puppet. When the king realizes that they are determined or insist on the ultimatum, he talks to the prime minister in private. Then he comes back to address the cabinet frankly that he is a human being. He is a king, not a puppet, and the king must work unlike the puppet. The cabinet should consider their own situation where they will be without the king. The king himself has only two options. Either he should abdicate or accept the conditions and become a puppet in their hands. He is obliged to decide the same day. Most of the things that he spends are to convince the cabinet that their position is stronger than the king. He convinces them that their success is certain if they insist. The king encourages their excitement, and when they are going to lose their patience, he surrenders. He asks them until 5 o'clock to consider his decision. Policy behind this speech and time is only to prepare the situation favorable to him. He uses his skills for the card that the Prime Minister has already applied. That's why he does not alert them with any hints that he is going to play their own tricks. After lengthening the time for decision, he finally brings them into unaccepted confusion by the declaration of the abdication. He uses the same conventional threat for tat and he is successful